Hello, welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri, and today I'm going to be doing a regular book review. This is Nine of Swords by Brooklyn Quintana. This book was sent to me for an honest review. I am not being paid for this, but I just want to be completely transparent about that. So in Nine of Swords, we follow Phineas Fogg, who is, I believe, about 12 when we start. We're going into summertime. He has a dad, he has a sister. They've been summoned to the capital because his family is royalty. His sister's a princess, his father's technically a prince. He is also a prince. They're related to the king and queen. It's a very, not so much medieval setting, but we're thinking about castles and fantasy. So like a very fantasy setting. When I started this book and I was reading this prologue, it was an interesting prologue, but it gave me the tone of something very dark is going to happen. So when we start on chapter 1, and it doesn't seem like everything is terrible. It's tense, but not terrible. I was a little bit confused. But again, if we're following a child, I guess we're seeing things through his eyes. He's still a little naive. He's still very new to the world. He's definitely new to the capital. And he is very, very new to the family tension that is present when he comes to basically this family reunion. His father, Felix, is a very sweet, gentle nature kind of guy. He's very accepting in terms of being told, basically in the prologue, that great things are going to follow Phineas, or he's going to do great things, or whatever have you. And you can tell that he's doing his best, but right off the bat, we know he's a single parent, and his sister Fiona, his older sister, has felt the need to step up into a motherly role, which is unfortunate for kids. But they're trying to make do with what they can with a missing piece of their family. And now they're going to meet other parts of their family. You have, by the way, when I opened this book, I was like so happy that there was a table of contents, but now I feel like there's a royal family. I need a family tree. You basically have the grandmother, the king, Lachlan, his queen, Ursuline. We have Gemma, the aunt, her kid, who's a tiny little boy whose name I cannot remember because we don't follow him. He doesn't go to Morency. He's very, very small. We have Prince Holland, who is the second in line for the throne, I believe, technically. That's how royalty works. And Carrion, I may be saying that name wrong. It's a very nice name on paper, but I may be saying it wrong, and for that, if I am, I apologize. He is the crown prince, and Lachlan, the king, that's his favorite son, no matter what. So, we meet this family where there's so much tension. Fiona is telling Finn not to fight with Holland. Holland is basically his age, and so the boys kind of have a fun little rivalry, which is really cool. And mind you, Phineas has dark hair and blue eyes, and Holland has red hair. And there's so many people in this book with either red hair or black hair. Also, as someone who does really like things that have to do with like Batman and the Bat family, when you have a blue-eyed, dark-haired boy with somebody who has red hair, that dynamic just seems to click to me. Anyway, right off the bat, this whole thing is suspicious because why is it that Felix is being called to the capital now? Obviously, he's not going to deny the prince. He's obviously not going to deny his brother, the king. You're not going to say no to the king. But why are they being called to the castle now if they haven't been there for all these years that basically Phineas has been alive? At the end of the summer is basically when Holland and Phineas go to Morency. And the crown prince, Syrian, he's already at Morency, but he's obviously a couple of years older. believe he's closer to Fiona's age, so about 16. And the thing about Morency is there's this thing called the games. Everybody at the beginning of this book until like the middle is cryptic about it. Until they have to go to the games, everybody is cryptic about it. All you know is it's competitive, you could die, you never know what kind of creatures are out there on all these different islands that they have to go to, but everybody is so cryptic. And meanwhile, you have this other mystery of who is attacking the royal family, because for whatever reason, this entire trip, they're just under attack. We also meet another very important character, Moriah, who is friends with Lachlan and Felix. Now, all three of them went to Mornsea together. Moriah comes from this whole clan called the Mordreys, and basically every single offspring they have is talented in something. Although Moriah seems to have made more of his name as being the leader of the Night Corps and directly serving basically the king. So during all this time that there have been attacks on the royal family, he's helping them. I'm suspicious because he seems a little detached at this point. Holland and Phineas both end up idolizing him, though, because Moriah's this big hero, right? He's got accomplishments. And I believe he won the game for his year. Not only is everybody very cryptic about what happens in the games, but they're also kind of like hush-hush about what happens in Morency, as if like you just don't talk about what happens in military school, even though it's a military school that gets you ready for the military and also the games. We just don't talk about what happens in military school. So I thought that was kind of weird. I think it could have been handled better. One thing that I will say that happens a lot in this book is as Phineas encounters stranger and stranger events, you're kind of pulled into this realm, almost dreamlike. So, in the times that Phineas goes to this dreamlike place, which is basically comparable to purgatory, except it's a lot nicer than it sounds, he's not technically dreaming. He feels like it's very dreamlike, but he is not dreaming. But when you have that, and then you have actually portions of the book where he's having dreams and it's a nightmare and you kind of don't know what's going on, but you know that he is not in that realm that he goes to when strange things happen, it's almost kind of off-putting because we have so many of these elements that are already repeating, and then to throw an actual dream or an actual nightmare in there is kind of overdoing it for me a little bit. But I like the little like purgatory realm. I don't mind it at all. I do find it convenient though. Finn's plot armor is thick. Right in the beginning of the book, he gets a cut on his hand and like he's got like regenerative powers. Which brings me to another thing that like we just don't talk about much in this book. It's magic. Magic exists. We know magic exists because when you go to Morrissey, there is different creatures. There's mermaids, there's fairies, all of these things, right? It's also a fantasy book. We see more and more of Finn slowly accessing his magical power. We get talk a little bit about magic, but it's almost like it's a hush-hush thing, as if you don't want the regular folk to know anything about magic. Which would be fine, except in my head I'm like, okay, but once he goes to this military school, he's gotta know, right? He has to be taught certain things. Not really the way that this book is set up. And that's not to say that it will never happen, but until basically these kids are put into the games and then they're placed within the different classes that they're supposed to be in, they're just in their tutorial phase. They're learning the basics. Another thing that I had to question is, I know in my mind, right, when you're talking about noble houses and things like that, technically they're very, very expansive and you got a lot of people. But when you're telling me this is a military school that caters to those nobles who send their children to this school, I'm thinking, so how big is your student body? There are 12 students within Finn's year, including himself and Holland. There are 12. And I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I just kind of want you to see where my mind is. There are 12 of them, and they're the first years. Second years, there are 15. So obviously, you cannot really make an army out of these, like, tiny amounts of different age pools of noble offspring, right? So I'm thinking, okay, you gotta get all these people specialized. You probably still have to draft commoners and teach them. So these are the leaders in the future, the leaders of if you have a war and you need the head of the cavalry, you need the head of the armada, the paladins, whatever. You have the nobility as leaders, this way constantly reinforcing that hierarchy. But it was really hard to kind of wrap my head around, especially with very early on in the book, the royals are being attacked. It is very obvious that the commoners are disgruntled. How do you convince them if you have a war to continue to work for you? These are the things that I'm thinking, but it's not things that technically need to happen in this book yet. Because again, Finn is only entering his first year. And he's entering the games this year because usually they're for second years, but the king has decided, since there's so much unrest, we're going to move it down. So first years are also going to join. So this year, you're going to have the first years and you're going to have the second years both competing in the games at the same time. And then after that, it'll be the first years. So literally, this is like, for these kids, if they haven't been taught some of the basic training, they're really going in completely blind. And they're kids. It's one thing you never expect. Child soldiers. So anyway, I know that my thinking might be a little bit advanced for the level of this book. I will say that the language itself and the style that it's written in, it almost hits the sweet spot where we're coming into explorations of what are the different kids good at? What are the teachers good at? What is there to explore about the school and the town and the different islands? What are the games like? And I think for the book of this size, the way that the author spliced everything in makes sense. But I want it to lean more heavily into the fantasy aspects. I feel like that's just a little bit of it that is missing. Given the trajectory of the beginning of the book, I'm expecting that's going to be something that we see much later on. And I think actually the second book came out this week because not this week, last week? Last week? Something like that. Because I was checking when the second book was because I was nearing the end of this one and I was like, I don't know where this leaves off, but I'm getting to the end and it doesn't look like it's ending. Like there's and I do really want to read the second book. I want to see exactly how far the adventures of these kids are going to go. But one, I think, kind of nitpick that I have, and it's not uncommon for this type of reading level. I don't know if there's a specific word for this. For example, it'll be something like, Finn says he likes apples. And then it'll be, the black-haired boy went to grab an apple. It'll be like, the fog offspring. Like, and this is all, like, in the same paragraph. It was the one thing that took me out of the book, because basically you're using so many different descriptors for the same person but we understand that we're looking at that same person. Again, if it leaned more into the fantasy thing, if it didn't give me so much cryptic stuff, maybe I would have enjoyed it more, but I think by the end of this book, we get into a place where you cannot accept a cryptic answer anymore. And I think that will definitely be a driving force for Finn in the second book. There's also a lot of talk about dark forces and lineage and what the royal family has done to keep in power. And it's just so interesting to me to see where they would end up taking this story. And I could ramble on about it. I am actually really excited about the plot twists that ended in this book, but I think that would get way too spoilery. So anyway, for me, this one is definitely a solid 3 out of 5, but where it leaves off is, I wouldn't say the biggest cliffhanger, but is a very promising type of ending. So I'm just expecting everything to amp up from here. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!